Governor Patrick, good to see you. Let's start out with what happened in Washington, D.C. and the riots up there by the radical right. I'm curious, you saw what we all saw. Did any of that change you?
No, it just makes us all more aware of what happens when people say things they shouldn't say. And I'm not talking just about the president, Jason. I'm talking about even Democrats go all the way back to George Floyd. We've had riots in the streets, police stations burned, buildings burned and looted, and it was kind of condoned by the Democrats. And then now you have the right upset and mad and not condoned by any Republicans. In fact, I think the Republicans have been very strong against it. But as I said, I wrote this missive called Enough. You can find it at danpatrick.org, click the updates to read it so it makes sense to you. But I said, look, these were Trump supporters. This was not Antifa, because Antifa would have been wearing masks to conceal their identity. So whether it's on the left or the right, what's important about leaders, Republicans and Democrats, congressmen and presidents and governors and lieutenant governors, is leaders are meant to calm a crisis, not create one. So the president didn't tell the rioters to go there. He didn't want that to happen, but he surely didn't lower the temperature that day of the moment. And right now, the Democrats, what they're doing on impeachment, they are not calming a crisis, they're creating one. And so people in office, people in life, people in social media, words matter, and you have to be careful how you say things. Look, I haven't always been perfect, but I do my best, but we really need to be focused on that.
Governor, the FBI is warning of potential political violence at state capitals across the country. Do you expect any of that to materialize in Austin?
Well, I pray not, Jason, but I will tell you, and without giving any classified information away, the Texas Capitol is always a target. I mean, it's Texas. It's the capital. It was the home of President George Bush when he was governor. And so we're always going to be a target. We stand for liberty and freedom and independent thought. And there are people on the left who don't like us, and there are people on the alt-right who don't like us. So we're always, we always have to be careful. Every public building today, we all have to be careful. Look what happened in Tennessee. I mean, you just never know. So we are on high alert, to be honest with you. Yes, we are.
Looking back at what happened in Washington, D.C. just before the Capitol riots, do you think, looking back now, that Senator Cruz should have or should not have challenged Joe Biden's win?
No, I think he had the perfect right. And this is what happens with the knee-jerk reaction, the political reaction by the mainstream media, not you all, but the mainstream media, the network media, and some of the cable channels and the Democrats trying to just destroy people. Look, in 2005, after George Bush won a close election with Kerry, Barbara Boxer and 30 Democrats did exactly what Ted Cruz did on the floor. Exactly. Because they wanted an audit like Ted did. I mean, Ted wasn't even challenging the election. He said, I just want an audit. Mm-hmm. He said, we got to move forward. And look, Jason, there are still over 50 million people in this country who think that there was something wrong with the election. And if we want to move forward as a country, let's be sure the count's right. I don't think the election is going to be overturned, but he was asking for an audit. Let's just see where those problems may have been or not. Let's resolve it. And so he did what Barbara Boxer did. That's what she wanted to do in Ohio. No one said she should step down and resign. Ted was in his perfect right to do what he did.
Let's talk about the legislature. Obviously, that got underway here this month. You're going to have about, you as the legislature, as a lawmaker, going to have about $1 billion less to work with. It's more, than you guys anticipated. But I'm curious, do you see any substantial cuts that might be coming out of that? Where do you make up that $1 billion?
So I have been very relaxed about this process through the whole pandemic for two reasons. Our economy will come back faster than others. And I knew after the election, whether Trump won or Biden won, Congress would finally come together and send some money to the states, all the states. First of all, the billion, there's two budgets we do, Jason. So our budget runs from September to August. So we're currently in the budget that we passed 2 years ago that will end this coming August. So we're $1 billion short for this budget. So we're right now about $1 billion short for what we anticipated. And we file what is called a supplemental budget. We'll fill those holes, and we can do that. We have the money to do that. We have CARES Act money. We have other areas to make that fit. I'm not worried about that. The new budget is the challenge because that's projected, somewhere in the $7 to $9 billion deficit. But our economy is going to grow over the next 2 years. In other words, when the comptroller gives us the estimate, Jason, the estimate goes all the way out to August of 2023. So there's no way you can predict accurately.
Right.
You could be high, you could be low. So I'm confident in the rest of this year, 2022, 2023, we're going to be doing much better. And I believe the federal government is going to send a package to all the states for some of the losses that we've all experienced through COVID. So I'm not concerned about that. We're going to maintain that teacher pay raise that we gave. We're going to fully fund education. We put more money in education last session than ever in history. The money we put in to offload property tax growth to the state, we're going to do all those things. So I don't anticipate any cuts. In fact, I think we'll have a reserve. Our reserve.
Wow. You mentioned property taxes. That's always a huge deal in the state. Is there any room at all, considering how tight this might be, even if there is a reserve, is there any room at all to lower property taxes again or to impact those for homeowners?
Well, it's a complicated issue, but let me say this again to everyone. We can't lower a tax we don't pass. Your county tax and your school tax are passed locally. We can't go in there and lower that tax.
But by fully, I don't say fully funding education because there's not enough money to do that, but by adding more money to education.
But, we put $11 billion in last session, right, Jason. I mean, you can't keep putting $10, $11 billion every year. But every year, Jason, for example, just to keep up with the new students, it's about an extra $1.5 billion to $2 billion. So every year we're growing the budget just to keep up. And then you have inflation costs. And again, my focus is on teachers. It should be a profession, not a job. I want every teacher to be able to make $75,000 plus. We gave the biggest pay raises that's ever been given. That was my driving issue. But on the property tax adjustment, just to close that loop, what we did is we said your government cannot grow more than 3.5% unless the people vote. That's never happened before. And your school taxes that were going up on average of 7% a year, we cut that, capped it at 2.5%. And the difference is we're paying for it from the state with our sales tax dollars. So what we did, we lowered the growth. So if you look at your property, again, we can't cut a tax we don't levy, but we can limit how much your local governments can, and we can offload some of that to ourselves. So most people that got their tax bill, last spring they were upset. They saw their appraisals go up, but your appraisals don't drive your taxes anymore. The local governments cannot grow more than 3.5% a year where they were growing 7 and 8, and schools cannot grow more than 2.5% a year where they were growing 7. So your taxes should have grown. The average person watching, instead of going up 7 or 8 or 9% as they were every year, it should be between 1 and 4%. There could be an outlier, it goes to 5, and some people
Right.
didn't go up at all. But that's what we did: lower the growth and give the voters a voice if cities and counties want more money.
Governor Austin works better than Washington for the most part.
Yeah, we do.
But let me ask you about the rule change in the Senate, because it used to take 21 votes or 20 votes to get a piece of legislation to the floor of the Senate for consideration. Then it was 19 because the Republicans lost a seat.
Right.
Now it's 18 that you guys just passed.
Yes.
We're hearing from some Democrats who say, well, listen, this is partisanship at its greatest, and you're just blocking out Democratic voices.
Yeah. So it's hogwash. And the media, most of the media repeats their hogwash. Here's the deal, Jason. We are still a majority Republican state. Every statewide elected official, we held all our seats in the House, and we still have an 18-13 majority in the Senate. The reason, when it was a 21-vote blocker bill, there were only 20 senators. So that meant 11 Democrats, because you had to have 21 votes to bring a bill to the floor. There were only 31 senators. 11 Democrats were in control of the Senate. Even though we had 20 Republicans against 11 Democrats, they controlled everything. That's why it was called the blocker bill. So I moved it to 19, or the senators did. They voted on the rules in 2015. That allowed us still to bring our bills to the floor without the Democrats blocking it. So we lost one Republican seat this time. So I have 18 senators. If we left the rule at 19, even though we're the majority, the Democrats could block every bill we wanted to pass that's important to our voters. Because if they have 13 and it only takes 13 to block, then we're stuck. So it's not about us shutting down their voice. It's about them blocking out the voice of the majority because we are a Republican state. But here's the news that the media never reports, Jason. We passed, according to Brian Hughes on the Senate floor yesterday, we passed 1,819 bills last session. Only 18 out of 1,800 and whatever the number was passed with only Republican votes. So the idea that Democrats, people would think, what did Patrick just say? 18 out of over 1,800 passed with only Republican votes. That means 99.99% had Democrat and Republican bipartisanship. And what were those 18? Those 18 are your Second Amendment bills, your pro-life bills, your religious liberty bills, where our parties disagree. And we don't want to be stopped from being able to pass those bills because we're in the majority. So that's all. And the Democrats understand it, but I understand they have to say something.
What do you expect to be the most controversial piece of legislation this session?
Election reform laws will be controversial, I'm sure. I think Democrats want to expand a lot more things, and we want to be sure everyone has a chance to vote. But for example, we want to be sure mail-in ballots, which we support. We want verifying signatures. That's what we do in Texas. And so we'll work that out. And
how about expanding early voting? Is that something you'd consider?
Well, we already have 2 weeks. We have the most early voting. I think maybe one state has it 3 or 4 weeks, but we have 2 weeks of early vote. And look, we didn't have any problem getting all of our votes in. We set an all-time record, Jason, an all-time record of voting. Just to give you a sense of things, in 2016, when Trump won in 16, there were 8.9 million votes. This year, there were almost 11.5 million. We had 2.5 million. We didn't have super long lines. No one had a problem voting, and we counted all of our votes by midnight. There were a few left over in the morning. Those states, those swing states that were counting votes for days and days, they're just dysfunctional because we did it, Ohio did it, Florida did it, California did it, New York did it, big states. We all had our votes in on time.
Yeah.
So, and then the other bill will be about police reform. We don't want to defund police. We back the police. If there are reforms that are needed, we'll look at those and we'll work with police and we'll work with the Democrats, but we're not going to defund police in this state, and we're not going to make it difficult for police to do their job. People want law and order.
Do you expect redistricting to get done in the regular session, or will that go to a special session like it has in the past?
So normally, we do that every 10 years, we do the census. So
Right.
Normally we get the numbers from the federal government in March or April. We're told now we may not get the numbers till June or July. So our session ends on May 31st. So I expect now maybe they'll pull off a miracle and get the numbers to us, but it takes us a while. We'll start hearings, but it takes us a while once we get the numbers to draw the maps. We have to redo the congressional maps, the Senate maps, the House maps, and we're going to do the appellate court maps. But that's not based on census. That's based on caseload of courts, the caseloads in the courts. So I would expect we'll be in Austin much of the summer. Just to do the math. It depends on the Census Bureau.
Yeah, obviously the state's waiting on that. Let me ask you one last thing here too. I know the border has been a priority for you over the years, and putting DPS troopers down there. I'm curious, has the state ever gotten reimbursed from the Obama administration or the Trump administration for any of the troopers down there?
No, the difference between Obama and the Trump administration, and it's in the billions now to Texas taxpayers over the years, is the Trump administration, with their deal with Mexico, put thousands of people on the other side of the border that Mexico paid for that helped cut down people crossing the border, and they beefed up the federal presence on the border. We will still spend about $800 million on the border. That's what we have been doing since I become lieutenant governor, and that's two things. It's not only for border security, but we pay every trooper in the state of Texas, no matter where they're stationed, a 10-hour workday instead of an 8-hour workday. We increased that. That's what DPS wanted to do. It gave them more boots on the ground when you multiply the manpower hours. So about a third of the money under border security actually goes to paying every state trooper in the entire state. And the reason it's under border security, because we rotate some of those troopers down to the border. So that's a big part of it. And let me tell you what I'm hearing out of the Biden administration and is not good. They're talking about opening up the border, giving green cards to people that come here. We're gonna be overrun. We're gonna go back to the worse than the Obama days. I mean, we've had a controlled border even before COVID, and we've been able to manage it. And it's going to, if they open it up wide open, Jason, the cost of Texas, our healthcare system, our education system, those who come here that commit crime, which are a small number, but it's a number. I'm very worried about that. I said something, Jason. You asked me about the rhetoric in the Capitol last week, and this missive I put out, enough. Again, danpatrick.org. Go to updates. I said, I'm not going to agree with probably one thing Joe Biden does. He used to be a moderate. He's now pretty much a wild-eyed liberal, and I'm a conservative. But I'm going to pray for the guy. I prayed for Obama. I prayed for Bush, and I prayed for Trump. We have to get beyond this, Jason, where no matter who wins the presidency, we're going to hate that person and try to bring them down. And that really started at the end of the George Bush era. It went through the Obama era. It went on steroids in the Trump era. And it would have been better for those who didn't want Trump just to pray for him and try to defeat him instead of trying to tear him down. I don't want to be a part of a group that wants to destroy Joe Biden. I want to defeat the Democrats in Congress in 22 and defeat them in the White House in 24. But a president is all of our presidents. We need our presidents to do well. And politically, when we disagree, we try to defeat them at the ballot box. But this idea that has taken off in the last 15 years, Jason, our country can't last if every 4 years, one side or the other is going to do everything they can do to destroy the president. And it was unseemly what the Democrats did to the President Trump. And I don't want that to be that way with Biden.
Governor Patrick, we appreciate the time.
Thank you, Jason.